Welcome, listeners, to another episode of Origins, a Creative Journey. We are here today with Sean Keeton. Welcome to the show, Sean.
Hey, happy to be here.
We are happy you're here as well. Sean, could you please share with us your origin story? Tell us about your creative journey to get where you are today.
Yeah, so odd thing for me about that question always is that every kid makes art, and most people at some time stop doing it. And I feel like really what happened is I just never stopped doing it. It was always my favorite thing. There was a point really early on where I had a lot of anxiety as a child, and when I was thinking about kindergarten, I drew everything I could think of that scared me, all these monsters and all kinds of stuff, and glued them onto my bedroom wall. And then shortly after that, had a big fever and had a fever dream where they like came out of the pictures and tried to attack me and stuff. But they couldn't do anything because I had created them. So that sort of kicked off art and making stuff is how I process my emotions and figure out who I am and what I feel about things and how I move towards what scares me in the world, but that I care about. So, one of my feelings about anxiety is that it's a signal that you should do something, not a signal you should avoid something. Because if you didn't care about the end result, you wouldn't be anxious about it, right? It means it's novel and that you care about it. Those are the two things that tend to, I think, trigger anxiety, at least in me. So that kicked that off. And then when I was about third or fourth grade, I got a pack of Magic cards, Magic the Gathering. And one of the cards was, anyways, it's a guy hanging upside down with a pentagram behind it. And that freaked my mom out. So she made my dad go return an open pack of Magic cards, which I was really bummed about, but ended up being like the greatest thing she could have done for me, because that forced me to make hundreds of my own Magic cards so I could still play the game. So I drew all my own cards on index cards and stuff. And that got me making all kinds of card games and board games and stuff as a kid, and comics and zines and all kinds of stuff. And then when I was time to go to college, I knew I wanted to make video games. And so the question became, do I become an engineer? Because I had taught myself some coding, like a lot of the adults thought was the smart road in my life, or do I become an artist? And I figured it out based on, I thought, okay, well, if I'm an engineer, what do I do after work? And the answer was draw. And I was like, okay, if I'm an artist, what do I do after work? And the answer was draw. I was like, all right, well, that's what you got to do.
I feel like, Sean, you are like the more motivated version of myself as a child of who grew up loving monsters and grew up loving Magic the Gathering. And then you went and made games and zines and taught yourself coding, apparently. And
Yeah.
I enjoyed school. But I want to go back for a little bit. So you mentioned just kind of like, oh, I taught myself coding. So I'd love to hear more. Was that in service of building games or
Yeah.
like what? Okay. And can you maybe just walk us through this childhood of yours, like where you were kind of building your own games at a really young age?
Yeah, really young. The board games and card games, yeah, started early in elementary school, but also the first video game I tried to make was probably fourth grade. And that was with a friend of mine, and he knew some coding. I didn't know any coding at that point. And so I designed this whole thing on graph paper because he wasn't good at that kind of stuff, and then like brought it to him, like, here's the game, let's make it. He wasn't good enough to, we got this guy, we built out a game, and we never figured out when the guy jumps how he goes back down. So you just jump into the air. We never solved that because we're kids. But it was a thing moving around that I had designed. So it was close enough that I went, okay, this is a thing that I could do. And then I was lucky enough that my dad is a mathematician and he knew a little bit of engineering. So I asked him some initial questions, and he like bought me a book and gave me a really old copy of C, like decades old, that he had free somehow. Because it was such an old-fashioned thing, I built out this big RPG, and then it eventually just told me, you're out of lines of code, and I had to stop it. But I mean, it's also that I was much more introverted as a kid than I am as an adult. And so there was a lot of me hanging out at home by myself. I was also older than all the kids in my neighborhood. I grew up in student housing for a lot of my childhood because my dad was getting his degree, and most college students didn't have a kid as old as me because my parents had me when they were teenagers. So I was much older than everybody. So that kind of limited the amount of friends in my neighborhood that I could hang out with. So I had friends at school, and then would come home, have to figure out what to do with myself. And that boredom and isolation sort of pushed me further into being an artist. And so something that at the time I think I hated, I'm very grateful for as an adult.
I just love this whole path. And by the way, mine was in sixth grade, and how we built a video game is we ripped apart someone else's code and then threw our,
Oh,
our
nice. Yeah.
yeah. The other way you learn code is steal. I think by knowing all that, as a good creative person, you start playing with all this stuff to learn all this stuff to make you better with what you're going forward with.
Yeah. Yeah. It was always that way. I never liked to learn tutorials or, go through like, it's always, I want to make this. I know what I want to make. And then how the hell do I figure out how to make that thing? And that's always what's driven me is I know the end result I need. Yeah.
And then all the things you just rip it apart, which is the great way to learn.
It's actually how I learned how to draw as a kid too, was I was as good as any other kid was for the longest time. And then saw one kid in probably second grade or something who could really draw. And it blew my mind. I was like, holy shit, like kids can do that? Like, okay, I got to figure that out. And the way I figured it out was I just got all the art that I loved from cartoons and comics and stuff. And I'm going to draw that picture exactly. I'm going to draw that picture exactly. And it taught me all these artistic principles without me realizing that's what I was doing. And then eventually I got bored of drawing other people's drawings. And I was like, oh crap, I can draw now.
It's an interesting thing that I think creative people, that's how we learn things. Which another thing that you hinted on, most of us creative people are introverts. We like to stay home. We like to draw. Because of what you're talking about, I'd rather sit and tear this apart or copy these artists' things than go play kick the can. But Sean, you're having conversations with me. You have a business. You do all this. How do you go from still being an introvert to faking it?
Yeah, it's a weird thing because there are people in my life that don't believe I'm an introvert because in the right environment, I light up. If we're talking about art, I light up, I get excited. And so a huge part of it for me was moving to LA and hanging out with artists. And inside of that world of people who think, at least reasonably similar to me, I feel way more comfortable and I can open up a lot and connect to people. And so really, I think it's having made art long enough that I'm really confident in the value of what I'm making has given the shy part of myself permission to interact with people and put myself out there. It's because I believe in what I make so much that it allows me to do that.
I love that. I think a lot of people have mistaken ideas of what introversion is, where they think it naturally means being shy, but I think it's like Susan Cain's book Quiet. I think I don't know if you're familiar with it, like really goes deeply into redefining what that looks like. And I 100% agree. Is that like, yeah, when you find something that lights you up, you can connect to it and you feel more, like you said, you light up and you get excited about, which is really cool. But I want to take us forward a little bit. So you've taught yourself coding, you've built your own games, and you're making zines and comics. Can you share with us how you took that love that you've been doing since you were a child into the realm of making it as a professional?
Yeah, so I went to animation school for college and for my thesis made an animated short that Nickelodeon picked up. And so spent the very beginning parts of my post-college career pitching cartoons to Nickelodeon, which they had, well, to Frederator Studios for Nickelodeon, because Frederator reached out to me for a cartoon show. Probably the biggest professional regret in my life is that at that point, because I was just out of college and someone's like, hey, we want you to come up with a cartoon for us. I was like, oh, this will keep happening. And they had like some notes basically of like, this is very funny, but the demographic you're hitting is too old for the slot we have. So we want you to make this more appropriate for younger kids. And I didn't really do the changes because like, well, that's not what I wanted to make. And so I kind of didn't do that. And so I wish I had seen what making that cartoon was, even if it wasn't my, the main thing I wanted to do at the time. But that got me used to pitching things and working with the studio and stuff. And so then I went to college in upstate New York, so I was on the East Coast, went to San Francisco because one of my friends was at a video game startup out there called Free Rings and got a job there. And so basically learned video game art production at that studio. And then we got acquired by Sega. And then I worked my way up at Sega to an art director, basically. And then, yeah, and then came out to LA once that studio was done.
My ears perk up. And I got lots of questions, though. So you even mentioned it before you came out to LA. So where'd you grow up?
Originally Santa Cruz.
Okay.
But it's Santa Cruz, California, San Diego. And then my dad got his PhD and moved us out to New Jersey. So I went to high school in New Jersey.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm from the East Coast, so I get to say that.
Yeah. Basically, as soon as I could come back to California, I did, because I remember coming back to California. This is just a silly thing, seeing the color of the dirt, which is very different than the East Coast, and being like, oh, I'm home again. This is how dirt's supposed to look.
I'm laughing because it's true. And I love your story. And the reason I love it, I'm getting excited, is everyone's like, oh, and then Nickelodeon pitched me a show and then I was off. It's no, it isn't, right? I don't want to call them failures, but all these steps and roadblocks and things that happen along the way. So you get this idea to pitch to Nickelodeon. It doesn't work out, which I've been there. And you think, oh, yay. Nope.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Just following the track. And then you end up in upstate New York. Where?
I was in Rochester.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I grew up in Schenectady, for anybody listening.
Freezing.
Yes, it's horrible. And then you're lucky enough, because life is a lot of accidents, that Sega buys this.
Yeah, bought a game I was working. Yeah.
So back in Rochester, you're working, and the reason I'm breaking this down is for people listening. I'm trying to get to the fact that it just doesn't happen overnight.
Yeah, it goes back to the thing I said earlier of, if I became an engineer, I would do art on the side. And if I did art for full time, I would do art on the side, which is, I don't think it matters as much how realistic a career path is supposed to be if you're obsessed with it. That will beat everything. And I don't think me as an engineer would be near as successful as a career, even though it's a much easier industry to work within, because I just wouldn't have the obsession to push me through and to make it go, oh, that's a big roadblock. Let me find any crack I can to squeeze through that little.
Freaking smiling over here. And two, if you were an engineer, is this thing in the back of your head that going, what the hell are you doing, right?
Yep. And the curiosity of, I just need to know. A lot of the things that I've done in my life are that even if it doesn't work out, I have to have known what that universe where I tried that is. I'd much rather know that it didn't work than always wonder maybe that would have been the thing.
That's so beautifully said. And that, I think, is a big trick in life. And no one should, eventually this whole trip ends.
Yeah.
And you should have no regrets? But there's a joke way to say regrets. Anyways, I love that about you, my friend. Okay, so we're at this little company in Rochester that gets acquired by Sega because of the game.
No, the company that got acquired, I had San Francisco for the small studio.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, and then that studio got acquired, by Sega, because of the game this game we were working on called Spiral Knights, which was like a MMO Zelda kind of thing.
Did it ever see light of day?
It did. It came out. It was one of the first free-to-play Steam games. It was in a batch of 3 with Team Fortress 2 and one other thing.
So now you're at this little place, you get acquired by a big place. How do you go from startup to corporate and then being able to go, okay, I'm on my path, I'm doing the right thing. I don't know what that path may lead, but let's go, right?
Yeah. No, I mean, there was anxiety at many points of the thing. So at first, it takes a long time to get very comfortable drawing, and there's a standard arc too where you get good at it but stiff, and then you have to stay good and get loose again. And that whole arc is happening while I'm a professional, and because I'm now a professional, this is how I eat food and have a place to live and all this stuff. So there's all this pressure you put on top of yourself. So how good you are ends up being a very serious thing in your mind. And I would have to stop and remind myself, you are drawing a wizard right now. Just, you gotta relax. You're doing something silly and fun, have fun with it. But the very beginning, it felt so serious that I stopped making my own stuff. And I had always made my own stuff. That was the main way I interacted with the world, because I started to think, well, if I'm going to draw, I really should be working on a portfolio piece because I should always be building my portfolio. And so, and then that just put all this pressure. And so drawing stopped being fun. So what I did is obviously I still did my job while this was happening. But outside of my job for 1 year, I got this giant sketchbook and I was like, all right, I'm going to draw on this every night. And it doesn't matter how good a drawing is in it. It's not going in a portfolio and I'm not posting it online. Literally nobody will ever see this but me. And that let me play around and just screw around and not worry about whether or not the thing was going to be good. And that's how I developed my personal style, which is what I use in my murals and paintings and all the stuff that I do. All the stuff I bring to Designer Con comes from the seeds that were in that book. And I've still never shown anyone that sketchbook. I have to, because I have to know that I believe myself when I tell myself that kind of thing. But it's birthed all this stuff since that I show everybody. So
I think that honoring that commitment you made to yourself about not showing this to anyone, I think is really powerful. And I think it's, I would imagine the temptation is often there from other people to be like, oh, like you've made it now. Like, I just want to like pick your brain and see like how you got to this style and everything. But I love that you're holding firm to that and really, I think that builds the self-trust in yourself that you're going to follow through in the things that you say you're going to.
and I might need that again in a different capacity. I don't think I'm going to get scared like that again because there's a point where I mean, I'll get scared at little things all the time. I mean, the first mural I did in front of was live for Secret Walls in front of an audience of 450 people. First time I had really used spray paint, I was, I was nervous, but there's a point where you're like, oh, I just do things I'm nervous about, and I don't know, it's like lifting weights or something, right? You're like, this still feels heavy, but I know I can do it, kind of thing. So I don't think I would need it as a like in the capacity I needed before, but I could very well imagine me wanting to explore a new visual area with my work and go, I need this to happen in a in a little chrysalis environment for a while before it's ready to show the public. And I need to know that if I do that, the subconscious creativity needs to know if I say that to myself, that's how it's really going to work. So it can actually be open and creative.
That's super cool, Sean. Thank you for sharing. And I think because the style that you do for Designer Con, your the fine art, prints, product design, murals, all of that is so iconic. Like I mean, like I'm a huge fan of your work, but like the way you use color and the design that goes into it. But can you share a little bit more about what it's been like for you managing the art direction and then managing a whole other career on the side? Because I think a lot of creatives can tell themselves that they're like, if I just had more time, I could be famous, I could do murals, I could get into galleries, et cetera, et cetera. But the reality is most of us work day jobs as well. And so could you maybe speak to how you think about it, whether from a time perspective or also maybe stylistically? Because I assume you're doing very different stuff for work.
And that's part of the secret. If the games I was working on were in the same style I do it at home, I don't think I would have the energy to go home and do my own stuff. It's because it's so different, it feels like a break. And so it actually helps me recharge so that I can go to my job and do what I need to do there. There's also a thing about working for a bigger project with a lot of people on it, which is the thing that's the most creatively satisfying is not always the right thing for the game. You obviously want the game to be as creative and fun as possible. It being fun is the whole point. So it should be very creative and very fun, but there are all kinds of sub decisions that need to be made and things created that are necessary for the whole to work, right? A lot of decisions where the CEO or the CFOs decide something and that's how this is going to happen, and it's my job to make that happen. And so it's nice to be able to go home and have something where I want people to like it. I want my paintings to sell. They do sell, which is great, but they don't have to. And that's also great. And the downside, I think that people forget about, where they're like, oh, if only I didn't have a day job, is I have a lot of friends who don't have a day job, but they just do their own art. And they get stuck in this thing of, if this painting has to sell or I can't make rent. And that makes it so they can't take chances and risk new styles or painting outside of the main thing that sells well. So like, I have this skeleton character that I really like doing. So he's in a lot of my stuff, and that guy sells really well, but I do paintings without him in it. And I don't feel pigeonholed. And if I ever feel like I'm done with this guy or I'm done with this style, I can move on because I can eat either way. And I care about it deeply. I want it to be successful. The fact that people really resonate with it means the world to me emotionally, but I get to do it for purely emotional reasons, which is, I feel like, a privilege.
That is so well said. And you remind me of John Buscema, the great comic book artist. Like, he hated drawing the Avengers. He hated drawing superheroes. He wanted to draw Conan, like that. He liked that stuff. And if you ever look at his stuff now, he would go home and, he would draw the Avengers, and then he would draw tons of Conan that wasn't for anybody else but himself. It's how he kept his sanity. So, Sean, I really love that you're hitting on there's a business side and a personal side. Like in your art, I get to be creative, I get to try, I get to be me. And a business side, I get to bring a little bit of me, but it's business. Like there's decisions. So I'd love to ask you, as a creative person, we always look for that next thing, the next challenge, right? And when you're in the business world for a corporation, how do you find that next challenge? How do you find the next thing? How do you keep going in that world? Because it's totally different than the other side.
I mean, the big thing that's happening for me now is on that realm is that I am going from art directing one property across different consoles and also mobile to also spooling up a brand new IP at the same time while I still have to do that first thing. So that's going to be, that's going to be the challenge for this year. There's always making things is not easy, and there's always unexpected surprises. That's true for the creative stuff. It's also true for the business stuff. And so it is very often, okay, the publisher or the internet or, Apple's terms of service or whatever it is, Unity's, which is the engine we're using, they're like payment structures changing. How do we still make this all work? So you're constantly just being thrown new problems to solve, and it's not always a problem you wouldn't have chosen it, but it does keep it from being the same thing all the time.
Yeah, I feel you on the payment structure. I'm dealing with that too. And the other thing, most people, when they get in business and work in the business world, their motivation is, okay, like it's linear. I work with so many people who are fake creatives, I call them. They're like, I'm going to be the art director, and they figure out the political paths they're going to take to get, the type, right?
Yeah.
You're not one of them. Just 5 minutes with you, you're not. You're like me and Rick and probably 90% of our listeners. So, but you're in a corporate world where you're not the political monster. How do you find that in the corporate world to keep your sanity?
On some level, I think it's the same way I used art to keep my sanity as a kid, which is just leaning into realizing it's all creativity and just, okay, what I'm good at is creativity. So if I've got a problem in any realm of my life, it doesn't have to be visual. I'm like, all right, how can I use the thing I know I'm good at to navigate through this? I think that's kind of the key difference between someone who's hired to, do a sort of manual task and someone who's hired to direct something or, yeah.
I love this idea of you extrapolating the creativity that you're using to solve visual problems of like the stories you're trying to tell and the worlds you're building, and extrapolating that to all aspects of difficulties or problems. Sean, what would you say was the most difficult part in your journey so far, to whether we're talking your professional career as an art director and or your, for lack of a better term, we'll call it the fine art career?
The most difficult part of my life is that about a year ago, my wife died. That put me into a place where I had to figure out how to re-engage with everything, including making stuff, what that meant for me, what I wanted out of life. It all had to be reevaluated. And prior to that, I was so clear on, really confident in, I'm doing what I want. I'm really happy with what I'm making. And then suddenly to go, wait, do I not understand my meaning in the world anymore? Was a huge shock. And coming back to it, but then the thing that I realized is, okay, creativity and art and the stuff you love is how you will survive this. So go back into that in a way where you're not running from the reality of what happened, but you are instead feeling it and letting it come through. And I got a little nervous because I made some paintings directly related to that. And I thought, oh, well, these surely won't sell because that nobody wants to put this above their couch. This is going to be a bummer. My stuff's usually so fun. There's skeletons in it. There's always been skeletons in it. Prior to any of this happening, it has nothing to do with that. But they're always so fun and happy and joyous, it felt like. And so now I'm going to have to make some stuff that's coming out this pain, and all those paintings sold. And including ones I didn't try to sell. People like DM'd me and were like, how do I buy this? And it turned out a lot of them had gone through similar things. And so there's a lot of people out there that have gone through intense stuff, but nobody is making stuff for them that's not cheesy and corny. It's all hummingbirds and butterflies and rays between clouds. And so it was an interesting thing to go, okay, I can be the most vulnerable possible. And I didn't lose my audience, but I didn't know. And so I just had to make that stuff. So I had to take the risk of alienating my audience. And I didn't. I'm surprised, but very happy.
First, thank you for sharing that. I mean, I can't thank you enough. Sorry for your loss. I can't imagine that one as you were talking, because I just can't. And I love that you shared that with our audience, Sean. But it just proves that as a creative person, we need to express ourselves. And when we express ourselves and we're true to ourselves, it will, quote, sell. Which is the beauty of what you're doing on the side, is the audience will come with you because they're your audience. They relate to you, make a better connection with them, which makes better stuff.
Yeah, there's early on when I started making my own stuff again after that period where I had the secret sketchbook. I remember thinking of it as being someone who had been so introverted especially when I was young. I thought of it as like these like pings to space, right? I'm like, all right, if I just can express exactly who I am and how I feel and send it out into the universe, let's see if I get something back. Am I as much of an alien as I think I am, or do other people resonate with this? And I've had the most gratifying parts of everything I've done is that every once in a while, somebody says, this piece really resonates for me on a deep level. I've had one person tell me that thing I did helped them explain their obsessive compulsive disorder to their parents that they'd never been able to do before. One college student told me that I somehow explained his autism to himself in a way that he wasn't able to do before through a comic I had made that was not about autism. So I was surprised, but still, that was really cool. And then one of the paintings I'm talking about that I made after my loss was about sort of having to pull myself back publicly, pull myself together to go out in the world and function as a human in front of other people. And somebody bought it because he said that he had gone through a mental health crisis, right? Where he was institutionalized and it was a really, intense thing for him. And then he did the work and healed himself to the point where he could reface his life and re-enter, his family and his life and stuff. And so this image, he said, was like he was putting up as like a victory of what he felt like he had worked so hard to accomplish. So those are very different, hard things to go through, but the emotion was still resonant to him in a way and that's so much more meaningful to me than any of the, sales numbers or that kind of stuff, which is still, those things are great, but that every once in a while, somebody just saying like, hey, this helped me feel more okay in the world. I would do all this if that's all there was to it.
Thanks for sharing that, Sean. I think it's so powerful to hear the way that your art has been a way for you to heal, for other people to heal. And I think it just speaks to the power of art and why any of us do anything, right? Is we all hope to be able to, share our stories and help other people process their own. So going into the way that you work in terms of your personal stuff, are you working through personal work in more of a like methodical way of like, oh, I'm always drawing, I'm always working on my next piece? Or are you an artist who sort of, for many of the reasons that you mentioned earlier, are you kind of creating when you have a feeling and there's something that you want to say? Could you walk us maybe through a little bit more of that process? Because I think so many of us would love to have that emotional resonance with our own work. So if there's anything that you could offer.
I don't wait for inspiration, because one of the ways to get inspiration is to move your hand, I think, and to do the stuff. And then there's two different ways that pieces start. One of them is I just open up a sketchbook and just start moving my hand and drawing. And I usually don't have any, like just blank head, right? And just move my hand and then do stuff and do stuff. And then at some point, your brain gets bored of drawing what you normally draw, and it draws something kind of interesting. And then I do that until I have the feeling of, wait, that helps me understand myself a little better. That helps explain how I've been feeling. And then I know, okay, that I have to turn into a piece. At that point, there's like, all right, let's figure out the composition. There's all the technical kind of stuff, but the initial thing is just, can I get something that teaches me something about myself? Because then the theory is somebody else will also resonate with that thing. Not everybody will, but the people that it's for will feel the same thing. The other piece is occasionally I will notice I'm feeling something really strongly, be a little confused about exactly what the feelings are and stuff, and then start going, okay, well, what's a metaphor for this? And start trying to think of visual metaphors for that. And so sometimes it'll come the other way, where it's the feeling first, and then I try to turn it into a visual. And part of that process has been that I do a lot of meditation. And I didn't do it for creative purposes. I did it for, anxiety purposes, and trying to understand what human consciousness is a little better and all kinds of stuff. But it has a good effect of clearing away the sort of loops I'm stuck in and letting a new thing come in that gives me a space where I can sort of think more creatively after the fact. So sometimes I'll also just go down and meditate if I am like, I'm stuck in a problem, and I'll meditate or take a walk, and then afterwards the solutions sometimes just leaps in that empty space you create.
I love how your thought process works, Sean. And if I'm understanding it right, while it's making money, don't get me wrong when I say this, it's not your source of income. The main source.
The video game is the primary source of income. Yeah.
Right. You're not having to go, okay, I got to get that net piece out. You can work from a more personalized standpoint of it.
The exception, of course, is that I do gallery shows and they have deadlines. So
other little things.
Yeah. But I can say no to as many shows as I want too. So that's, which I do frequent. So the thing I try to keep in mind on that front is, if what I wanted was to make a ton of money, art is the dumbest way to go about it. There are careers called finance. Yeah. Like, you can decide to have a career that is getting rich. That's a career path, and they'll let pretty much anyone on it if you can, get yourself to college, which I was able to do. So I didn't choose that for a reason. And so I don't ever want to sacrifice what I love about art for any of the ancillary benefits. And I think of the monetary stuff as an ancillary benefit, not the point of it.
That's really cool, Sean. With that in mind, I would love it if you could maybe share any advice you would have for aspiring creatives. And I think you've made the case for having a day job versus doing art solely. For those who are like, I would want to do art full time, do you have any advice that you would want to give them?
So yeah, in terms of doing fine art full time, I think it's important you got to trust yourself enough to believe that if you think something's really cool and worth making, that the audience will appreciate that too. And not fall into a trap of trying to make what you think will sell really well, because I can't see how that will be unique enough for you to stand out. The things that will make you successful as an individual artist are specifically the things that are weird about you. And the things that make a Marvel movie popular are not those things. So you're not going to compete with the giant corporations. So just don't try to enter into their realm, and figure out what's specific about you, what's weird and interesting about you, and and go all in on that. Here's the trick. The trickiest part of it is you got to be persistent. You got to not let yourself be discouraged. There's all kinds of things that won't work. You got to keep going, but also do pay attention to when the world kind of starts to light up by something you made, right? I made a lot of comics for a long time, and people liked them, and they were meaningful to some people. And then I started making paintings, and I was having more fun, and everybody got really excited. Like, and so I was like, oh, like this is it's like finding a good relationship or something. Where you're like, oh, I don't have to fight to make this one work. It's just working. Listen to that too, right? If that presents itself. So that's a little difficult because it's don't give up, but also shift to something, the part of the thing you love that's working, if you can see that. Those are kind of disparate, like opposite things, but it's art. I mean, like your career is also art. That's part of it. And so you're going to have to feel your way through it. And there's not going to be here's the path that you follow and to success. And that's even true if you want to work for a studio. I can't give you put exactly this in your portfolio, apply to this studio, and you'll get hired. I mean, be super friendly to people, help out when you can, go where your enthusiasm is, show up to events that have the kind of people you want to work with or who make the kind of art you want to make. So that works if you're studio side or art side, right? Like if you love a certain kind of art, go to those gallery shows. If you love a muralist, go watch them paint a mural and offer to help them. And don't expect anything in return. Just do it because you're excited. And if you want to work for a video game studio, go to video game meetups and meet the people who make them and just go because you're excited, and go to a game jam and make a game together for, the game jam is like a weekend where people make a really quick game together, and they don't make any money or anything, but they're like a great way to learn and meet people and stuff. So go where you're excited and just be really nice and enthusiastic and do it because you love the thing. And then when there's a problem somebody has, whether that's they need another artist to fill a space on a gallery wall, or they need a specific role at their studio, they're going to think of you because you show up and are fun to be around and helpful.
So follow your passion and don't be an asshole.
Yep.
Yeah. Sean, that's perfect advice. Rick and I, before you got on, were absolute fans of your stuff and we're talking about it. So, and mine is, I just love how you put colors to color. There's simple choices, but the application and the use is just phenomenal. So I would love to hear who inspires you, what motivates you. Life is all about what you absorb. What do you absorb?
Early influences were a lot of cartoons and video game stuff. A lot of, and also like comics, like Calvin and Hobbes, skateboard graphics, psychedelic rock posters from like the Fillmore and stuff, Looney Tunes, old black and white, like 1940s cartoons. That's where a lot of the rubbery arm stuff I do probably comes from. So sort of that Fleischer era kind of stuff that sort of come back around recently with like Cuphead and that kind of thing. I was really into Ren and Stimpy and Rocko's Modern Life and those kind of Nickelodeon cartoons. And then also the sort of older era of video games where they had to make the characters really iconic because they didn't have a lot to work with in the graphics. That kind of distilling something down into really like iconographic pop thing I really like. And then in terms of my colors, that's a combination of, so my wife was an artist too, and she was really good with colors. So I partly was very inspired by her sense of color and stuff. And then also my brother took me on an acid trip when I first moved to LA, and I had never done psychedelics before. And I had a whole ego death, crumbled apart, reborn kind of thing. And the world looked like this sort of impressionist painting, but also it's a weird, talking about psychedelics is so weird because you can't actually articulate any of this stuff. Somehow it was downloaded into my brain. Here's how quantum physics works, and you can now see it. And here's how things aren't solid, and here's the different particles, and how it's all just energy fields. Nothing's really solid and connecting. And so that's part of like the dry brush and stuff I do, where all the colors are, instead of mixing a color to make it, I like layer the discrete, the yellow and the green and the blue to create the new color, because it kind of shows like, okay, this looks like overall this color, but if you look closely, it's all these disparate little elements and things aren't that solid. And I'm also trying to play off the fact that my lines are very, very solid. Like the shapes and the lines are really clean and solid, and then the paint splatters and the dry brush is intentionally pushing against that stuff going the opposite direction. The hope is that it's not a midpoint between order and chaos, that it's like full order and full chaos in different areas.
I love that idea of the order and chaos existing in the same piece, but being disparate elements. That's such a cool way of thinking. And I'm looking at your work and I'm like, yes, that makes so much sense. Sean, this has been super amazing. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us. Where can people find more about you, your work? Where can they pick up a print, et cetera, et cetera?
So I'm Sean Keeton Art on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook and all those things. And then .com is where my web store is if you want a shirt or pen or print or whatever.
All right, Sean. And how we kind of like to end the show is we always like to give our guests the final words. So any great things you want to say to us?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just gas up DesignerCon a little bit because it's my favorite convention I've ever done. I really, really like it. And before I started tabling there, I went as just a fan of it. And I remember the first time I went back when it was in Pasadena, just getting so excited to go home and make stuff that I hadn't made before, seeing all of the amazing, all the amazing stuff that other people are making. And so it pushed me to broaden the types of things I make. And so I'm very grateful to DesignerCon for doing that. And also for my friend Alex Party for asking me for 2 years in a row, do you have a table yet? To push me into getting one.
Thanks for checking out another episode of Origins, A Creative Journey, a DesignerCon podcast. Please follow and subscribe on whatever platform you're streaming this on, and check us out on Instagram at Origins, A Creative Journey. And if you have any suggestions or questions or comments, email us at deconpodcast@gmail.com. And make sure to get your tickets and hotel deals now for DesignerCon's 20th anniversary celebration in Las Vegas, Nevada, November 14th through 16th, 2025. I hope to see you there, but in the meantime, go make some art.